Thank you. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member. It's great to be back in the committee, and I really appreciate the focus today on, in part on trade. Of course, trade is incredibly important to our producers in Minnesota, very, very important to the health and vitality of the agricultural community in Minnesota. And we need to make sure that trade is working for everybody, for all of our producers, including small producers. I appreciate the question that Senator Fetterman started with. So, Undersecretary Taylor, let me start with you. I have been focused on how we can support tribal agricultural production in the United States. With this in mind, Senator Hoeven and I worked to include in the 2018 Farm Bill provisions to include tribal representation on trade missions. Historically, the USDA hasn't done everything that I think it could have to support tribal producers. So there's a big opportunity here. For example, in Minnesota, traditional wild rice plays a really important role in Native communities, and there's a growing export market for traditionally harvested wild rice. And, you know, tribal harvesters should have good, fair, equal footing. So can you tell us what strategies are in place to promote greater inclusion of tribal agricultural and food products and trade-related activities? How's it going at in USDA, and how can we use the Farm Bill to continue promoting indigenous food products?
Senator Smith, thank you for those questions. Having previously worked for a member from Montana and in the state of Oregon, I fully appreciate how important our tribal nations are, and how important making sure our programs that we are administering at USDA are that they are working for them. As you mentioned, the 2018 Farm Bill actually directed USDA to develop some goals around tribal participation within our trade-related activities. We have a key partner in the Intertribal Agriculture Council. We work very closely with them. They are our MAP and FMD participant. They often participate in trade shows. Coming from the State Department of Agriculture in Oregon, we also had a Western regional group that was a state and regional trade group tapping into market access programs. I know my colleagues, in particular in Alaska, some of the Alaska tribes participated in these programs as well for promoting seafood exports. So I think we appreciated that direction from the Farm Bill. We are ramping up that engagement with our tribal nations, with, in particular, the Intertribal Agriculture Council, but certainly welcome additional feedback on how we can continue to engage to make sure our programs are working for our tribal nations as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and we'll look to work closely with you on this because it's very important. I have another question for you. This is related to geographic indicators. The European Union continues to impose geographical indications that can block the use of commonly used household names for cheese and other products. And this is a significant barrier, a roadblock for U.S. dairy producers. For example, in Minnesota dairy, including groups like AMPI Co-op, they make cheeses like Parmesan, Asiago, Romano, Fontina, which would face unfair barriers if they tried to export these products to the EU or other countries that are influenced by the EU stance on geographical indications. And in the USMCA, we had hard-fought provisions around this issue that forced Mexico, for example, not to restrict access to U.S. products. So can you tell us how you and your colleagues at USTR are building upon those efforts and update us on what your strategies are and what more you think that we need to do in this area?
Thank you, Senator Smith. I have yet to see feta on a map. So I think at times these GIs are also clearly to restrict our trade, and which is a large concern to in particular our dairy producers, but broader than that as well, can feel the impacts. We have a multiple-pronged, I think, approach to trying to address this. First, working with countries who are either engaging in negotiations with the EU or have concluded negotiations with the EU to articulate our concerns, to make sure they understand the market access rights that we currently have and how that could be impactful there. I think we are also engaging just broadly with our trading partners to ensure, again, that this doesn't become a new trade barrier for our exports. And then we're also engaging in multilateral forum about this issue. So the WTO, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperative Forum, APEC, and then there is a World Intellectual Property Organization as well, where we are engaging to make sure that intellectual property rights are being respected, but that these are not becoming these generic names that we use, that are being used all over the world, do not become a barrier for our trade.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate this. I have one question which I will put in for the record, having to do, following up a little bit, I think, on Senator Thune's question about how we can expand export markets, specifically looking at Cuba as an export market and what we can do there more. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our panelists who are here today. Trade is vital to Nebraska's agricultural economy. Agricultural exports from Nebraska were valued at $6.5 billion in 2021. New and